Welcome. Today we're undertaking a very careful examination of the source materials that detail the 2002 Bali bombings.
Yes, and our goal here is to really walk through the facts as the sources present them. We're looking at the attack itself, the incredible bravery shown in the aftermath, and the very complex legal process that followed.
We want to provide a clear, contextual understanding of what happened, an event that, really sent shockwaves across the world.
And when we start, we have to absorb the sheer scale of it. The sources are absolutely clear. On October 12, 2002, what happened in Kuta was the single worst act of terrorism in Indonesia's history.
And it wasn't just one explosion.
No, not at all. It was a coordinated series of attacks, multiple detonations, almost simultaneous, and they were specifically engineered to cause the maximum number of casualties in an area packed with international tourists.
Before we go any further into the mechanics, we have to pause and acknowledge the human cost. The loss of life was just immense.
It truly was.
The sources list 202 people killed. 88 of them were Australians, 38 were Indonesian, and the victims came from 21 different countries in total.
A global tragedy, really.
It is, and we just want to express our deepest sympathy and respect for all the victims, their families, and of course the survivors. Their lives were changed forever that night.
So our examination today will move through a few key phases. We'll start with the anatomy of the attack itself, the timing, the explosives, the technical details.
Then we'll move to the stories of heroism.
Yes, the incredible resilience people showed. After that, we'll track the investigation, which was a major international effort, and then navigate the really complex legal and constitutional challenges Indonesia faced.
And finally, we'll look at how this event is remembered through memorials across the world.
That's the plan.
Okay. Let's start then with the anatomy of the attack. The setting, Kuta, Bali. And the timing, which seems so deliberate.
It was. 11:05 p.m. Central Indonesia Standard Time, October 12th, a Saturday night.
Which is peak time for a tourist district.
Absolutely. It was a busy tourist season, and a lot of Australian sporting clubs were there for their end-of-season holidays. The area was just incredibly crowded.
So that moment, 11:05 p.m., that's when the first explosion happened.
That's the start of it.
Yeah.
The very first blast, according to the sources, was inside a place called Paddy's pub.
And what kind of device was that?
It was a suicide bomber, someone wearing an explosives-packed vest. It was a smaller, high-velocity explosion.
So its purpose wasn't necessarily mass casualties on its own.
Not primarily, no. The sources suggest its real purpose was strategic, to create panic. To injure people inside, yes, but more importantly, to drive this terrified wave of people out into the narrow street.
A herding mechanism. To push them right into the path of the second, much larger device.
That is the chilling logic of it. Because just 20 seconds later, the main attack struck.
A car bomb.
The car bomb.
Yeah.
A white Mitsubishi van parked directly outside the Sari Club.
Which was right across the street from Paddy's pub.
Exactly. And the Sari Club was a much bigger venue, open air, with a thatched roof. The design of the club itself tragically contributed to how the blast wave and the fireball just engulfed everything.
And there was a third part to this plan, which I think sometimes gets forgotten.
That's right. There's a third, much smaller bomb. This one was detonated outside the U.S. consular office in Denpasar, which is a different area.
So minimal damage from that one.
Very little damage, and only minor injuries. But its placement suggests a secondary objective. Maybe it was symbolic, a statement against the U.S.
Or, as some intelligence suggested, maybe it was a diversion.
It's very possible. Some reports indicate it might have gone off slightly before the main Kuta blasts, perhaps to try and draw police and emergency services away from the real target.
Let's talk about the main bomb, the forensics. The media at the time, they were all saying C4, right? Military-grade explosives, given the devastation.
That was the immediate assumption. You see a crater that deep, that level of destruction, and you think it has to be something sophisticated.
But the forensic sources found something else entirely.
They did. And this is where the expertise of the bomb makers becomes so clear, and you see the connection to the wider terror network. It wasn't C4.
What was it then?
It was made from common, readily available industrial chemicals. The main charge was a mix of potassium chlorate, aluminum powder, and sulfur.
Things you could, potentially buy without raising too many flags.
Precisely.
Ah.
But to get that kind of power, they amplified it. They used a TNT booster to kick off the main chemical reaction. So the plot didn't require some complex arms deal, it just required chemical knowledge.
Which brings us back to the funding, that $30,000 from Al-Qaeda. If you're using cheap chemicals instead of expensive military explosives, that money goes a lot further.
Exponentially further. $30,000 might get you a small amount of C4 on the black market. But with bulk chemicals, you can build a weapon of enormous size. It shows a kind of horrifying pragmatism.
The sources described the assembly in the van as incredibly detailed. It wasn't just a pile of chemicals.
No, it was professionally constructed.
Yeah.
The total weight was just staggering. 1,020 kilograms. That's over a metric ton.
And how was it packed?
They packed the chemical mix into 12 separate plastic filing cabinets.
Filing cabinet.
Yes. This allowed for stable transport and systematic arrangement inside the van. Then, these 12 cabinets were all wired together with the PTN-filled detonating cord to ensure they all exploded at the exact same instant.
And the trigger.
94 RDX electric detonators.
Mm-hmm.
It was an incredibly sophisticated multi-point ignition system built into a simple van. A factory of destruction.
What was the physical effect of that kind of explosion?
The forensics noted it mimicked a thermobaric device.
Meaning
Meaning it wasn't just a blast wave, it created this massive high-temperature fireball that uses the oxygen in the air around it to sustain the explosion. It generates immense heat and a prolonged, devastating pressure wave.
And that explains the crater.
A 1-meter-deep crater where the van used to be. It vaporized vehicles and structures for hundreds of feet around.
The immediate aftermath, then, was a medical catastrophe.
A complete catastrophe. The local hospital, Sangla Hospital in Denpasar, it was overwhelmed in minutes.
What were they facing?
Dozens and dozens of catastrophic burn injuries all at once. Plus severe trauma from the blast itself. They didn't have the burn units. They didn't have the specialist doctors. They didn't even have enough basic supplies.
Which led to that one detail that is just so hard to comprehend. The use of hotel swimming pools.
It speaks to the absolute desperation of the moment. With no facilities to treat these horrific burns, people were taken to nearby hotels and put in the pools.
Just for some kind of relief from the pain.
For any relief from the agony of those burns. It was a makeshift, non-sterile, last-ditch effort because the formal medical system had completely collapsed under the strain.
So how did the seriously injured get the help they needed?
It required a massive international effort. A huge medical evacuation operation.
An air bridge.
Essentially, yes. The Australian government and others had to fly patients on military aircraft over vast distances to get them to specialist care.
To where?
To dedicated burns units. The main ones were in Darwin, which is 1,800 kilometers away, and Perth, which is 2,600 kilometers away.
An incredible logistical feat.
It saved hundreds of lives, but it also shows just how completely unprepared the local infrastructure was for an attack of this nature and scale.
It's difficult to shift from that horror, but the sources do, and they focus on the human response, the acts of heroism that happened right there, in the wreckage.
And this is so important. These actions were happening while the fires were still raging, with the very real fear that another bomb could go off at any moment. That's a common terrorist tactic, to target the rescuers.
Let's start with the highest civilian honors given by Australia, the Cross of Valor. 2 were awarded.
To Senior Constable Timothy Britton, an off-duty police officer from Western Australia, and a man named Richard Joyce.
And what did they do?
They went back into the burning Sari Club. Repeatedly. Britton himself said he was convinced there was another bomb set to go off, but they went in anyway.
To rescue someone.
Yes, a woman who was badly injured and trapped deep inside the collapsing, burning building. It took them 3 separate entries into that inferno to finally get her free.
And they were injured themselves.
They were. They suffered severe cuts, burns, smoke inhalation, but they kept searching until the fire was just too intense and the building too unstable to continue. It was sustained, selfless bravery.
Then there are the stories of those who received the Star of Courage. The story of Natalie Gould is just remarkable.
It really is. It's a story of incredible friendship. She had actually escaped Paddy's pub after the first blast. She was safe.
Her friend wasn't.
Her friend, Nicole McLean, was still inside, and she was badly hurt. So Gould made the decision to turn around and go back into the fire. She burned her own arm and hand, getting to her friend. She dragged her out, and then had the presence of mind to make makeshift tourniquets from 2 men's shirts to stop the bleeding. She stayed with her all the way through the medevac flight back to Australia.
An incredible act of loyalty. And then there's Robert Meredith, who was at the epicenter of the Sari Club blast.
He was thrown onto his back by the force of the car bomb. But despite the chaos, the flames, he got up and immediately started helping people.
He created an escape rope.
He and his friends did. They helped about 10 other survivors get over a high wall. The wall actually collapsed from the weight of everyone climbing over, and it injured his feet. But even then, he kept directing people to another way out.
And Lauren Monroe, she also just kept going back in.
She did. She was knocked unconscious by the blast. When she came to, she pulled an injured woman out from under some collapsed roof beams, carried her to safety, and then she went back.
For how long?
For 2 hours. She spent 2 hours going back into the burning club, helping more victims, even helping to fight the fire itself. Just tireless.
One of the most famous images from that night involves Hannah Beth Luke. She received a commendation for brave conduct.
Yes, a truly heartbreaking and powerful story. She was in the Sari Club with her partner, Mark Gajado. She managed to escape by scrambling out through the collapsed roof.
And her first thought was to find him.
Of course. She was desperately searching for him in the street. He'd been killed instantly. But in her search, she found someone else. A young man named Tom Singer, badly injured and lying right next to a burning car.
And she knew he was in immediate danger.
Exactly. She realized if he stayed there, the car would engulf him in flames. So she put her own search on hold. She helped him up and got him away from the fire.
That's the photo we've all seen.
That's the moment the famous photograph captures. Her helping him away from the flames. It's an image of pure compassion in the middle of hell. Tragically, Tom Singer died a month later from his injuries, but her actions saved him from a truly horrific end at the scene.
Beyond these individual rescues, there were people who organized the chaos. They received the Medal of the Order of Australia, the OAM.
Yes, people like Kusatino Kasi Hellamai. He was the manager of the Bounty Hotel. He just opened his doors, sheltered survivors, and started creating some kind of order out of that overwhelming chaos.
And Richard and Jelana Poor took it a step further.
They did. They set up a triage center right in their hotel lobby. They were fielding calls from media, from frantic families. But then, after 3 days, they flew to New Zealand.
Why New Zealand?
To get medical supplies. They gathered 80 boxes of specialized burn dressings and ointments, and then they flew back to Bali, not just with the supplies, but with 2 specialist burns nurses to help the overwhelmed local staff.
An incredible personal initiative.
Truly. And finally, James Parkinson, an emergency nurse.
The one they had to track down?
That's right. He basically ran the trauma center at Sangla Hospital during the crisis, doing incredible work, and then he just moved on. He was nominated for the OAM, but the government had to spend 3 years looking for him because he'd gone traveling through Africa and Europe. He wasn't looking for any recognition at all.
Let's shift our focus now from the victims and the heroes to the perpetrators. The prime suspect group was Jemaah Islamiyah, or JI.
Yes, an Islamist group with alleged links to the radical cleric Abu Bakr Bashir.
And what was their stated motivation?
The sources outline 2 main reasons, framed as retaliation. First, against the United States for its support of the war on terror after 9/11.
And second, specifically against Australia.
Specifically, for Australia's leading role in the liberation of Timor-Leste from Indonesia in 1999.
Can you just briefly explain why that was such a trigger point for a group like JI?
For them, Australia leading a UN force to secure Timor-Leste independence was seen as a Western, Christian-led intervention that broke apart a Muslim-majority nation, Indonesia. They framed it as a humiliation and an act of aggression, making Australian tourists a deliberate, symbolic target.
And this wasn't just a local plot. We know there was external funding.
The financial link is undeniable. Former FBI agent Ali Soufan confirmed it. An al-Qaeda operative named Ridwan Isamuddin, better known as Hambali, confessed to receiving $30,000 directly from al-Qaeda.
And that money was earmarked for Bali.
Specifically to fund the Kuta nightclub bombings. It shows the attack was sanctioned and financed right from al-Qaeda's central leadership.
So with that funding, how did the investigation piece together the actual logistical plan?
A lot of that comes from captured intelligence and confessions, which were later summarized in reports like the Yusindo report. It lays out the almost mundane details. The main plotters, Amrozi, Idris, Ali Imran, they went and bought a new Yamaha motorbike and the white Mitsubishi van.
Just like any other transaction.
Exactly. They even asked about the resale value of the motorbike, showing this cold, transactional mindset.
And the coordination of the 3 bombs required very precise timing.
It did. The reconstruction shows Ali Imran planting the small bomb at the U.S. consulate earlier in the day. Then later, Idris drove the van with the 2 suicide bombers into Kuta.
He dropped them off.
One bomber put on the vest and went to Paddy's pub. The other, whose sources say could only drive in a straight line, took the van the last few meters to the Sari Club.
And Idris and Imran then retreated.
They retreated on the motorbike. And as they did, Idris used a simple Nokia phone to detonate the consulate bomb just moments before the main blast in Kuta, a very deliberate sequence.
The huge breakthrough for the investigation came with the arrest of one man, Amrozi bin Nur Hassim.
Amrozi's arrest was the key that unlocked everything, but his reaction to being arrested was bizarre.
What happened?
He was asleep. The police came in, and he didn't struggle. He just laughed and said something like, "Gosh, you guys are very clever. How did you find me?" This strange, carefree attitude became his trademark during the trial.
But the real prize wasn't Amrozi himself.
No. The real catch, as investigators called it, was his mobile phone,
His contact list.
his entire network.
Yeah.
The police kept his arrest quiet for 48 hours and printed out every call log, every name, every number. Then they announced his capture and monitored all those numbers.
And what did they see?
A brief, frantic storm of calls between the other suspects, and then complete radio silence.
That burst of activity allowed them to pinpoint their locations.
It was brilliant police work. It led them right to the rest of the cell before they could scatter and go underground.
And what evidence did they find at Amrozi's home?
Overwhelming evidence. Bags of the same chemicals used in the bombs, receipts for the materials. And ideologically, they found speeches by Osama bin Laden and Abu Bakr Bashir calling for jihad, along with ambush training manuals. It was a complete package, linking him physically and ideologically to the plot.
This led to the arrest of all the key players, Imam Samudra, Ali Imran, and the others.
Yes, the whole operational cell was rolled up relatively quickly after that.
So with the perpetrators caught, the focus moves to the Indonesian legal system, which proved to be incredibly complex, especially when it came to Abu Bakr Bashir.
Bashir's case is a maze. He was initially charged in 2003, but not for Bali. It was for other plots, like the 2000 church bombings.
And he was acquitted of the main charge, treason.
He was. He got a reduced sentence on lesser charges. Then in 2004, he was arrested again, and this time finally charged with conspiracy in the Bali bombing.
He was found guilty of that.
He was, and sentenced to 2.5 years, a sentence that Australia and the U.S. publicly called disappointingly short.
And then even that conviction was overturned.
Correct. Indonesia's Supreme Court overturned it in 2006. In the end, he served less than 26 months for his connection to the deadliest terror attack in the country's history.
But for the men who actually carried out the attack, Amrozi, Imam Samudra, Ali Gufran, the verdict was very different.
They were all found guilty and sentenced to death. Mukhlis, who was Ali Gufran, even confessed to being the head of the cell and ordering the bombings, confirming the funding came via Hambali from Afghanistan.
So justice seemed to be moving forward, but then the courts hit a major constitutional crisis, and this centered on the use of retroactive laws.
This is a critical point. The case of another convicted bomber, Maskur Abdul Qadir, brought this right to the forefront. He appealed his conviction, arguing that the laws he was tried under didn't exist when he committed the crime.
The government had passed new anti-terrorism laws after the bombing.
Exactly. They introduced them specifically to prosecute these cases. The new laws allowed for the death penalty and, crucially, lowered the standard of evidence needed for a conviction.
And this was challenged at Indonesia's new constitutional court.
Yes, a court that was a symbol of the country's new democracy after the fall of Suharto. It was a huge test for them. The public demand for justice versus the letter of the Constitution.
What did the court decide?
By a very narrow 5-4 vote, they sided with the Constitution. They ruled that trying suspects under retroactive laws violated a fundamental article that guarantees rights that cannot be limited under any circumstances.
A remarkable decision, really, given the political pressure.
It was. The dissenting judges argued that this was a crime against humanity, which should be an exception. But the majority held firm to the absolute protection written into their constitution.
And what was the practical consequence of that ruling?
It was a huge blow to the prosecution. The charges against Qadir and another suspect, Idris, had to be dismissed. It showed this painful struggle between delivering justice and upholding the rule of law in a new democracy.
But the death sentences for the three main perpetrators, Amrozi, Samudra, and Gufran, stood.
They did. After all their appeals failed, they were executed by firing squad on November 9th, 2008.
And that carefree demeanor of Amrozi's did it last to the end.
The sources say no. While he laughed through his trial, reports from the execution stated he was pale-faced and shaking.
Their final act was shouting, Allahu Akbar.
It was, and their funerals caused clashes between police and their supporters, who tried to frame them as martyrs.
But the official religious bodies pushed back on that narrative.
Very strongly. The deputy chairman of Indonesia's Ulema Council made a public statement saying, "They did not die a holy death. That can only be in a war, and Indonesia is not at war. It was a crucial move to deny them any religious legitimacy.
More than 2 decades later, the memory of this is preserved in memorials all over the world. Let's start in Bali, at the site of Paddy's pub.
At Ground Zero, yes. There's now a permanent memorial there. A large, carved stone monument with a marble plaque listing the names and nationalities of all 202 victims. It was dedicated on the second anniversary in 2004.
But the Balinese community also responded in a different way, with a focus on life.
Yes, the Kuta Carnival, a celebration of life. It's an annual 9-day festival. It's about remembering, yes, but also about cleansing, community survival, and showing the world that terrorism wouldn't destroy the spirit of Bali.
Given Australia's heavy losses, there are numerous memorials there. Each one seems to have a unique design.
They do. In Melbourne, there's a fountain in Lincoln Square with 88 water jets, one for each Australian victim. And every October 12th, the jets are turned off, and it becomes a silent reflecting pool.
The one in Perth had a very specific geographic intention.
It did. It was designed in Kings Park so that at dawn on October 12th, the sun's rays would shine through it, perfectly aligned in the direction of Bali. A beautiful concept.
Though a new building now blocks that view, I believe.
Unfortunately, yes, but the original intent is what's so powerful.
And in Sydney.
There's a memorial at Coogee Beach, where many of the victims were from, with 3 interlocking bronze shapes representing figures supporting each other, and another in Cronulla called the Seed.
But to understand the global scope, you have to look at the memorial in London.
That one really captures it. It's a large marble globe with 202 doves carved into it, one for each life lost. It recognizes that the victims came from 21 different nations. It's a truly international memorial.
Perhaps one of the most powerful stories of resilience for Australians was the return of AFL player Jason McCartney.
His story is incredible. He suffered second-degree burns to over 50% of his body while helping others escape. He nearly died.
And his comeback became a national symbol.
It really did. After months of excruciating rehabilitation, he played one final game of professional football.
And he wore 2 numbers on his jersey.
He wore 88 for the Australian victims and 202 for the total number of dead. He helped his team win and then retired on the spot. It was just this singular, powerful act of defiance and courage.
Finally, how has this event been represented in culture, especially within Indonesia?
There was a major Indonesian feature film in 2006 called Long Road to Heaven.
And it took a very particular approach.
It did. It told the story from multiple perspectives, including both the victims and the bombers, across 3 different timelines. It was a really ambitious attempt to process the event nationally.
And there were also efforts to counter the extremist ideology directly.
Yes, like a comic book called When Conscience Speaks. It was designed as a peace-building tool. It told the story through the eyes of a volunteer, a victim, and a repentant terrorist to show the human cost of radicalization in a very accessible way.
Of course, there was documentary coverage as well.
Yes, shows like Seconds from Disaster.
Yeah.
But there was also, on the other end of the spectrum, a very controversial pornographic film called Bali Bombings that actually used real amateur footage from inside the clubs before and after the attack.
A truly jarring example of how tragedy can be exploited.
A very stark reminder, yes. So, to bring it all together, the sources show us a meticulously planned attack, funded by a global terror network, but executed with local, readily available materials. The aftermath showed both a catastrophic failure of local medical infrastructure and, at the same time, an incredible outpouring of human bravery.
And a legal system and a young democracy struggling to balance justice with its own constitutional principles.
Precisely. A profound struggle between the need for retribution and the commitment to the rule of law.
It makes you think. We've talked about the global network here, an attack in Indonesia, money from al-Qaeda, a motive tied to Timor-Leste, victims from 21 countries. Given that this was such an interconnected international act of terror, what is the way we remember it? With these separate, varied memorials in Perth, London, Melbourne, Bali, what does that suggest about how we share the global burden of remembrance and whether we see these as individual national tragedies or a single collective wound? Thanks for listening.